Yes, that's right. I did that all. Awesome. Thank you. So it is very rare that I get an opportunity to, one, walk on stage and potentially kill myself, and two, that I'm presenting after someone who has a similar name to me has just sung. I doubt that will ever happen again. So, I should talk here. Okay, great. So, I am an economist, so now we're back to something different. And Luis Cabral and Matt and I are all involved in this, and we come at it from an industrial organization kind of point of view. We're interested in firms and industries and thinking about that. One thing that we heard a lot about yesterday was that even though the music business would like to think it's different than other businesses, there's a lot of ways in which it's not. And what we're going to think about here specifically is a way in which it's not. One thing that's happened in the past few years, as we've all seen, is that the internet has really changed how music is distributed. This is true in a lot of industries, that now the distribution component is much different than it used to be. And so what that means is that now, because most music is priced exactly the same, we don't use the pricing mechanism, but we use something else. People are choosing who to listen to and what to listen to based on, oftentimes, influencers. And so Matt has a research program thinking about the impact of influencers and what they do. There's a lot of recent work thinking about regulations and how to, make sure that influencers aren't bad actors, etc. What we're going to think about here is looking at one influencer in particular, and that's Pitchfork. So Pitchfork is an online magazine. For most of you might have heard of it, but for those of you who haven't, it's an online magazine that's similar to Rolling Stone, and basically what they do is they review music. They review 5 albums a day, every day, and they give it a numerical value. So that's really awesome. And so we're going to look at how that might impact people's choices. Now, of course, discovery is important, and so the focus question is, does a really good review matter? One of the problems is that, of course, you're going to end up with higher number of reviews. If you get a 10 versus a 9, more people are going to listen to it, partially because it's a better quality product than the 9. And so we're going to use something that's kind of nice, which is Pitchfork created a best new music ranking as well. So in addition to getting a numeric value, they also allocated some of these albums as best new music. So let me tell you a little bit more about Pitchfork. It was started in 1995 by a recent high school grad at the time. It's gone on and is still around. It is considered the most popular online music website. They have over 240,000 readers a day and more than 1.5 unique visitors in a year. So this is a big and important website in this space. All the albums are going to be ranked from 0 to 10. Zeros, there are albums that get zeros. They get 0.0. There's a long history about that. If you're interested, we can talk more about that. And the increments are going to be in 0.1. So you can get 0.0, 0.1, 0.2, etc. What's nice for our problem is that in 2003, they basically started designating, along with the review, some of the albums to be considered best new music. Now, what many people might then point out is, oh, but most of the albums that were above 8 got Best New Music. It turns out that not all the music, all the albums above A got Best New Music, so that's great for us because that allows us to identify exactly the value of getting this best point, at this value, the value of getting an 8. So we're going to focus on that. Now, for those of you who've never looked at Pitchfork, this is what it looks like. And so, you know, it's just the usual kind of stuff. You look at across the top, they've got latest, best new music, reviews, features, etc., etc. And so if you want to look at a review, here's a review of a new album. This is called Snail Mail, is the band. And it's a debut album. And so over here you see the number, 8.7. And in addition, it was rated as Best New Music. So that's the kind of important feature that we're going to look at. Now, is Pitchfork really important? For those of you in the industry, you probably already know it has a lot of, it has an important place in the independent music realm. But here are 3 quotes. One from the media, so the LA Times says, look, this is really important for the iPod generation. That's from a long time ago, as we all know, but you know, it's still important. And record companies recognize the importance. Essentially, when Pitchfork reviewed Arcade Fire's album, it went out of print because it was so important, and they got, you know, that mattered a lot. And then, of course, somebody who is in a band said a thing about a publication like Pitchfork is they can decide when it happens. So, you know, clearly there's a lot of reasons to believe that this is a really important influencer. Now, why do we think, because they're already giving you a score, why do we think that this Best New Music label really matters? Well, if you've ever gone onto eBay, you'll see that many of the sellers have rankings. You know, they say 99% favorable, positive reviews. But in addition, on eBay, they also get something called the bestseller award or bestseller badge. And one of the things that's important is that they're salient. People can see that and recognize it. It's the same way with the Oscars. This won an Oscar, so people are more likely to go. And as we saw with what Joel has presented, Joel basically pointed out playlists matter a lot in terms of the streaming and the time, the number of plays that these albums get. And so getting a Best New Music badge, in a sense, essentially means that you're more likely to be on these playlists. And many of these, you know, there's lots of Best New Music playlists, Best New Music for a particular year, etc. What do we find? What we find is that getting a Best New Music designation increases the number of plays by about 6 times. That's at a particular point, and we'll talk more about that. And it increases the number of listeners by 4 times. So these are big numbers. I did not calculate the numbers the way that Joel did by telling us exactly what that means in terms of dollar effects, but you know, you can see these are big numbers. What I want to point out as well is, what this says is people are listening to these albums more, and there's more listeners that are listening to these albums. So it's not just that the people who are listening to them are listening to them more intensely, but that there's more people listening to them overall as well. So there's both an intensive and an extensive margin that is increased. So what is the pitchfork? What is the data that we have? We're basically looking at from 2003 to 2014. We know what the score is. We have the best new music dummy. We know the release date. And we also have the full text of the review. Thank you. So that's going to be more stuff that we're going to look at in the future. We also collected data from Last.fm. And we also have Metacritic scores, which I'm not going to get a chance to talk about, but we'll keep on going. Okay, so, what you should notice here is that only, on average, about 8% of music is designated as best new music. But otherwise, and you can see the differences in terms of the number of listens between the max and the min, and also the average. Okay, so what is this? This just plots out the data and says, here's the pitchfork score, and here's the number of listens, the logged number of listens, depending on what your score is. This is the average log of listens. The gray area here is just a confidence interval, so it turns out that some albums with zeros get very few listens and some get higher. And then this red line is for the number of plays given that you have no best new music designation. The blue line is for those that got best new music designation. What's great for us is that we have an overlap. There are some albums that didn't get best new music, got less plays, and some that got the same scores, got the best new music designation, and got more plays. So this is very suggestive that we're seeing something interesting. Now, one thing that we want to think about is, where is the density? Where can we really estimate what's going on here? This basically just says, what is the fraction, given that you got a score of 8, what is the fraction of albums that got a score of 8 that got also a best new music? Not very many, and then it gets higher. And so, because this is a little bit more full, this is the area that we're going to use. We can also see that, between here and here, there's really not much going on in terms of listening. And what we're going to do is use a fuzzy regression discontinuity. So we're just going to estimate right at 8.3, the value of getting best new music compared to not getting it. So there's all sorts of stuff that we can talk about. The results are basically, we're going to have a large effect from best new music on the listens and the plays and listeners, and we don't see this with Metacritic, which I didn't talk about. And so the best new music relationship, I can also show you something there, but that's the really nerdy slide, but we're going to ignore that. So here's what really matters. If you got 8.3 and you didn't get best new music, we would expect you to have about 800,000 listens. If you did get best new music, you get about almost 5 million. That's a huge effect between getting best new music and not getting best new music. What about in terms of listeners? It goes from 60,000 to about 240,000. So again, a big effect.